Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Muneera Bano, and it's so nice to be here with the Royal Society of Victoria to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I think it's very relevant to what we will see in the near future in a post-COVID world. It's about whether we have artificial intelligence or artificial stupidity, and what would the role of diversity and inclusion will play in the futuristic society that depends on artificial intelligence. I'm a senior lecturer at Deakin University in School of Information Technology, and I'm one of the superstars of STEM with Science and Technology Australia for 2019 in 2020. We, as a society at the moment, have reached a crossroad that we have to decide with this technology and the concepts of AI. If we increase our reliance, are we going to move towards a society where everyone will have the prosperity that are promised, or are we just moving towards the destruction and the gloomy future based on what we are being told, what predictions have been made, or maybe somewhere in the middle of the spectrum we end up? And this, whenever I think about the choice that we have to make here, it reminds me of the Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Societies. And I'm going to read this passage because this is going to be relevant to whatever I'm going to talk about later. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. So let's dive into and see what artificial intelligence is and how our past has brought us to the point that we have to make a decision now for the future. Thinking about the past, what do we know happened? We know from history, the history that was written by the victors, glorifying their own achievements. We know about the wars, we know about the slavery, and we know about the colonization. At one point or the another in history, they were all considered okay. Everyone seemed to be in favor of them. The war that were fought for capturing lands only ended up destroying everything that was there, or if not destroyed, just to capture the land along with the people and to crush their culture, their language, and their civilization to dominate one's own culture on top of them. We would like to think about that this is something that will happen in the past and the humanity has evolved and gone past these ideas. But we still have dreams. We are looking for the empty lands somewhere outside in the universe that we can still go and put the first footprint there that belongs to us as humans. The basic psychology is still the same. The war that were fought in the name of race, where one race was so convinced that they are superior to other that they were ready to eliminate. They were completely killing and finishing the others who were not looking like them, who were not talking like them, or who did not have the same beliefs. Racism up till the last century, we have seen, and it's still there. It hasn't gone away. We see them emerging right, the pockets of it somewhere in the world, and we also see the consequences. Then slavery, something from the past, where you see that there were people who wanted to know that another human being would be subjected to obedience to the level that would not question any orders that were given to them. Once again, it's slavery is illegal now, even though we do have the desires to have obedient beings around us who would just carry out our orders without questioning for whatever reasons, for entertainment or other purposes. We still do like to follow the basic psychology. As a humanity, we do have those desires still with us. No matter how technologically sound we have moved in future. And then comes the wars that were fought in the name of God. Two groups of societies who were so convinced on their own version of truth that killing the other was considered a holy act and an act that would please their own Lord or gods. In the name of God, we still see people who still think it is okay to kill other people, because this would, in some shape or form, please their own God. Now, this psyche of the humans to search for the God was always there. Human beings are vulnerable, they have limitations, they have fears and uncertainty. And throughout the history, we have seen the concept of God, which was some supernatural being who would protect the humanity, to whom the humanity would make sacrifices, and they would be alleviated from all these human limitations that we as a humanity feel. And even though some of them now considered myth because the followers were either the civilizations died, or they completely, the religions were taken over by other religions, we consider them myth, but the basic psyche is still there. Then came the age of science, and we moved forward, but this idea of having some supernatural being who is quite above the human limitations, who can protect, who can look after the society when we don't know and we cannot predict what will happen, it's still there. Quite a lot of people, they like this idea and they follow them as a cult. So basically, the past has taught us that as a humanity, we want something, a supernatural being that is always connected, always listening, always watching, all knowing, and all powerful. And we keep crafting more and more as a human being to come up with a solution. We are still vulnerable. We still have uncertainties. We still don't know what will happen. And we want a supernatural super being provide that protection, who can give us the answers that we want to know, who can tell what will happen in the future. So, have we crafted a God out of artificial intelligence? We need to dig a bit deeper before we accept AI as God. So, exactly what is artificial intelligence or AI before we accept this religion? It refers to the collection and tools and techniques designed to extend human capabilities of information acquisition, analysis, processing, and decision making. And the emphasis here is to extend human capabilities. We are trying to move beyond what we ourselves are incapable of. It's the quest to build machines that can learn, reason, and act intelligently. And I would like to point out here that the definition of intelligence is coming from us, the humans. It covers the latest advances in machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, natural language processing, big data, Internet of Things, smart cities, and robots, a wide range of academic specializations being open in all these fields in the recent years. You name it, all of them are there. But what we need to understand is that these algorithms, or the set of rules that are behind AI systems, they are trained on data sets in order to understand the world or perform whatever task we want them to perform. And this is where the whole problem will start. And I'm going to go into the details of what now the data would mean. When we think of data, we come up with some idea of something that is devoid of emotion or a voice of logic and reason. To some extent, yes, that is correct. A data itself means nothing. But at the same time, it's so critical. This is the building block of reality. By putting all the pieces of data together, that's how we create our reality. We make meanings out of things. How do we understand? How do we interact with other people and objects and environment around us? It all comes down to the data. So this is the hierarchy with which in information system we understand how this data will take us all the way to the knowledge and wisdom. We have to give some meanings. We have to give some context to this data in order to provide us with some information. The patterns in the information provides us with knowledge, and cross-analysis of knowledge along with the practice over time provides us with the wisdom, which is more of a glimpse of a future where, based on our knowledge, we can know or we can predict some patterns of what is going to happen next. Now, I can give an example. Every day, a lot of us in Melbourne are sitting every morning, we wait for the numbers of new cases. Why do we do that? What do those numbers mean to us? Because think about it, the context. We are sitting in a lockdown and we want to know the numbers if they are going down, because this is a lot depends on it, whether we get out of the lockdown, whether the rules are, the restriction are going to be eased for us. Our daily activities are being restricted by these numbers. So these numbers have a special meaning for us. And then put in a proper order and provided to some algorithms on a computer, these numbers predict a future that at what stage it would be possible for the authorities to declare that it is okay for people to go out. But again, once again, it comes from data. The data has to explain. And that if the data is correct, then the picture is correct. But whatever is coming from there is creating the picture of the reality that impacts our life. Now, let's move a bit further from how much data at the moment is created in the cyberspace. So the estimate is with more than 2 billion users alone with Facebook, four big stores, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook, they hold at least 1,200 petabytes between them. And that's 1.2 million terabytes. And by 2025, 175 zettabytes, which will take one person to download 1.8 billion years for one person to download at the current speed. And you can see that in 1 minute, how much of the data is uploaded on internet for every social media account. So now this is beyond, manual processing or any existing processing systems. And we are moving into the era of big data, where we need the systems or the servers or the machines that can scale to the amount of data that is being produced. Because right now, there are, just like I said, the traditional data processing applications do not scale to these numbers. And once again, the variety, the volume, and the velocity are all there being moving forward in such a direction that think about it at one point that how much data about one person will be there in the future. So I'm going to talk about the AI, that how AI is now making use of these data sets. And let's go back a bit in the past, where we are talking about a pre-digital era and all these historical records that were there. If we use these historical records to make our artificially intelligent system understand what the reality was for humanity, we already talked that it was full of racism, sexism, and religiously targeted violence. And at one point in history, it was considered okay in one way or the other. And then on top of that, the historical data, it has huge data gaps. It was written by the victors, those who were not part of the victory team. They were presented in a different light, or they never exist. The one of the biggest one that is talked about a lot even to date is the gender data gap. I think it's quite obvious what the term would mean, but I'm just going to give an example here. A dystopian society of Handmaid's Tale, but if you think about it, it's still there somewhere in the world. Across a dominant part of Afghanistan, women are not addressed or referred to by their names in public, even on wedding invitation or tombstone. They are typically referred to as the daughter, wife, or mother of their father, husband, or eldest sons. Many Afghan believe that it's dishonoring of a woman. So if we think about a data-oriented society or the digital future, a good proportion of that society do not exist. This is kind of, if you would like to think, a digital genocide of underrepresented people who do not have any data on them. We, as humanity, for the society that is dependent on data for the future, have to accept that future will not include everyone. There will be no diversity and inclusion. Let's move to the present. We already talked about the problem with the historical record, but now at present, we say that we have social media accounts. People are connected, only the people who have the means and the resources to connect to the digital resources, but that's a good proportion of every country. So let's have a look at these individual, or not individually, but some of these platforms. And in the digital era, we have the most brilliant thing, because some of my research and my directions are related to it, is the natural language processing. And it's an amazing, amazing thing, that a genius thing that I think technology has come up with. We as a society, if we make meanings or have the social interaction through languages, the technology has made it so easier for people coming with different linguistic backgrounds to connect with each other, to know each other. And then it's moving beyond that. It can identify the sentiments, it can extract information, it can question answer on the phone, and it can translate as well. So we now have all these different apps and techniques or technologies present in our mobile devices that can talk to us just like a normal human being. But let me point out to one of the problem here. These algorithms, once again, they come from historical records, and this is one of the classic example that we show of the problems with what happens when there is historical records used for current system. So here we have a Google Translate. I have put some gendered roles for in some sentences to show what happens when you translate it into Persian. And here I have put she's president, she's a strong leader, she's a doctor, she's a scientist. And then for he, I have deliberately put he's cooking, he's nurse, and he's delegate. So trying to break the stereotypes here. So Persian is a gender neutral language, and the translation literally means like this person is a president, this person is a strong leader, this person is a doctor, and so on. Now I copied, pasted, and tried to translate it the other way around. It came down to the AI algorithm to select the gender in English for each role. AI algorithm selected he for president, leader, doctor, and scientist, but selected she for cooking, nurse, and being elegant. That was translated from being delicate. Why did this happen? Why the AI algorithm was sexist towards different role? Because simple statistical generalization from the training data set, which comes from the historical records, which we already talked about was full of racism and sexism. Now, Amazon, another current Amazon voice assistant, the current solution for voice recognition systems, 2/3 of the female owners say that their device failed to respond to their voice commands. Why this happens? Because the lack of diverse sample for training data set. If we have software development teams that comprise of all men of one particular type of accent, of course there will be, they maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, they are going to select the data sets that may not include diverse voices. Another example is that a beauty contest was judged by an artificial intelligent and the robots didn't like the dark skins. So if an AI algorithm is trained with certain looks and given a certain standard of beauty, it cannot come up on its own with the rules to define the beauty that do not look like what it's trained on. Google image identification system came under a lot of criticism for racist identification of people who look different than what the image system previously have been able to identify. Self-driving cars came under a bit of controversy because the facial recognition system, they would struggle with people who have darker skins and may not recognize them as humans. Once again, lack of diversity in the training data set. There has been some research on human facial features and then calculating the trustworthiness of how you look. And imagine these kind of AI system making to the criminal justice system just with the facial feature that you are born with and you can't do anything about it. And the AI is now telling that whether you are a trustworthy person or not. Then some of the feminist research has recently criticized that the smart voice recognition systems, they are trying to reconstruct the old traditional roles and the domestic responsibility of the wives and taking the gender equality efforts back to where we were a century ago. And then once again, some of the research in AI is going in the direction that no one wants to, where they can be used to target someone for the victim, and it mostly are the women who becomes the target of such kind of apps. They are not intended to be built for men, but for revenge to be taken on women. So a couple of years ago, I conducted a research when I was at Swinburne University. We wanted to understand the nature of the hate speech on Twitter in one day. The long-term project was that how this data that comes from a social media would impact the decisions of artificial intelligence system. And approximately 400,000 tweets in English in one day we downloaded and we performed sentiment analysis and tried to categorize the data on the scale of non-threatening all the way to threatening based on the strength of the hate that was exhibited in the tweet. And the three classifications that we came were sexism, racism, and religiously targeted. And the categories, the one that was considered non-threatening, which was unconscious bias attitude, all the way to category 5, which was the very explicit violent content. And we can see that less than 1%, around 1% was threatening hate speech, not all of that. And the majority of the part you can see on the pyramid belongs to category 1, 2, and 3. But let me say that, okay, it was 83% of the hate speech was dominated by the non-threatening sexist and racist joke, which is consistent with other research, because in daily life, mostly the racism and sexism is projected as humor. But the problem is that if this data was fed into an AI algorithm, the consequences would be very different, because AI do not understand sarcasm or humor. The impact of this would be devastating, because the reliance on AI-based system, or supposedly this big data, where you cannot manually sit down and filter out the sarcasm or humor, and this will create a racist and sexist social reality in cyberspace. So for us, maybe it would be an unconscious bias, a joke, but for AI, it's a conscious statistical data from which it will conclude the kind of reality that it wants to create. So before we actually craft a very powerful God out of AI, let's pause and appreciate the level of corruption and the lack of diversity and inclusion in the current data sets. Just like I said, that the picture of the reality that we want AI to understand will all depends on the data, which is the building block. So how much this has cost or impacted our life so far? Construction of artificial reality is through these social media platforms, where we put a very particularly special form of ourselves. We don't put our true selves out there. We try to construct an artificial reality out there on these social media platforms. What we are trying to seek here is a validation, or as we call them, likes or shares or retweets. This is a human nature to be appreciated. One of the vulnerabilities that I talked about, where we need someone else to come and tell us that this picture is beautiful, this picture is worthy of a nice comment. And what happens is that for the social media platforms, the more the clicks, the more the engagement, the more the revenue, because you get more advertisements, and your preferences, the more you read and the more you click, it will show your profile as certain kind of advertisements can be directed towards you. So we conducted a few years ago research on what would make a system success, and one of the any system to be successful is to have the user satisfaction. And the user satisfaction, one of the measurement was that the more the users are going to be engaged, the more there will be usage, and the more if there is more usage, of course, there is more chance that the advertisements or other types of specific targeted data that you want to show, or the post that you want to show, the people will interact with it. And also increased engagement of the users will also show that what kind of preferences they have, what kind of stuff they like, and then it's easier to monitor their behavior and to know that if you show them certain types of contents, they are more likely to click or buy or respond to whatever you put it out there for them. So it's the more like you are pouring your souls into these platforms unknowingly, even though you think that you are constructing an artificial reality, but by your engagement, maybe unconsciously you're giving away your true self. So one of the example was this classic example is the US presidential election of 2017, and the scandal that came with it was the Cambridge Analytica, where the Facebook preferences were used to target the undecided voters and try to push them to have a political opinion. And what happened was that up to 87 million Facebook users, they had their data exposed by Facebook to the Cambridge Analytica, and that they were working for the Trump campaign. And the details, if someone is interested, they can watch in The Great Hack. It was quite amazing that how unknowingly people have given away their political opinion by not showing any political opinion is showing your political identity as a uncertain voter. And then you get bombarded with a lot of uh, politically targeted campaigns and ads that have paid the Facebook. So nobody actually human is sitting at the Facebook and watching you. It's the algorithms that are working in the background and trying to see that what do you click, what do you like, what do you comment on. And if you're not doing that, still that is giving away your position. So once back to construction of artificial reality, the models on the social media usually work around divide and engage. So there will always be two sides of the story, which will be have some shape or form of controversy, because this is what will increase the engagement. And just like I said, that the engagement is what leads to increase in the revenue. This is the business model. That's how the newspapers work, or the television networks, they work, but it's also for the social media as well. So you always will see that you will find the contents based on the kind of likes that you put there. If I take say that I'm against racism, I will get more contents that will be related to my preferences. But if someone thinks otherwise, they will get their own reality. So this artificial reality that is constructed there by divide and engage depends on our preferences. I am not going to see the same contents as the other party. And that's why it's always very difficult to make conversation with someone, and everyone is so convinced about their own reality because we are not seeing the same picture. Now, think about it. There is always going to be a two-sided story for different kind of audience. Our preferences are more personalized towards how we are using the social media. Two people will not have the same trends or hashtags presented to them on Twitter or other platforms. We have recently seen quite a strong divide even here in Melbourne during the second lockdown. And sometimes it's amazing that why the two sides cannot be convinced on one truth, because there are multiple versions of truth out there that are trying to encourage people to get engaged into more and more contents that will be created on the social media. Now, another part of this construction of artificial reality would be the behavior monitoring and prediction. We already have seen quite a number of recommendation system on YouTube, on Facebook, because of the contents that you have already viewed or clicked or liked. You are presented with more and more. And sometimes the algorithms are quite accurate in telling you exactly what is it that next you will be clicking on. We have seen the examples in Netflix that what we have watched already, or what we continue to watch, or what we discover, 80% of the time, the people will choose another recommendation based on the system, the algorithm that will be presenting the new findings to them. Now, we can go and check on why we see these recommendations, like why Facebook is telling me about the people that I may know, or why Facebook thinks that I might be interested in certain sort of ad. So someone like me who never had any political debates, or I try not to click on anything that's of a controversial nature, I may have been tagged as uncertain voter, but during this lockdown, I was watching the press briefings to check about the updates on COVID and the situation in Melbourne. And all of a sudden, I got this ad about open labor, and I have no idea what this open labor is. But I went and checked that why am I seeing this ad? And this phrase here was very striking to me. Facebook thinks. Facebook is not a human. Why is Facebook thinking for me? So this was quite interesting for me and my research later on, that Facebook is trying to think that what would I be interested in, how to push me to click something or watch something. And it's keep on sending all these ads to me now. And these last 2 and 3 months, I have seen quite a number of politically motivated ads that were not there before. So it reminds me when I was in high school and we used to read this Harry Potter series, and in the Harry Potter and Chamber of Secrets, Arthur Weasley tells his daughter Ginny, never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Just like I mentioned before, no one in Facebook knows me. The humans are not operating this data. These are the algorithms. So how do they operate? What are they doing? We don't know anything about them. What they shouldn't be thinking for us. FB is a tool. We should use it as a tool. So recently, I watched this movie, which was very interesting. Another one, how this artificially constructed reality, once it reaches to the real life, and what kind of devastating impacts it can create. So, this fictional film relates to an ongoing real life situation, such as the use of social media to psychologically manipulate users and navigate public opinion through the fake news. It is a representation of how online propelled hatred can lead to severe consequences and real life casualties. And in reality, this movie has some inspiration from the real life where actually a politician was targeted and killed during an event. Because of all the hatred that whoever was the killer, he was receiving all these contents online and got radicalized by it. So even in a cyberspace, even we are putting selective contents out there, we are writing history. Only that in the past it was written by the victors. Now it's written by the keyboard warriors and the trolls. So before we move forward, we have to understand that artificial intelligence cannot move forward without ethics. Law, policymaking, humanities, social sciences, they are quite far behind, and the technology is moving untethered into the future. Only recently that in 2020, I saw there was a report by UNESCO on artificial intelligence and gender equality. Now, everyone all of a sudden is realizing that so far these AI algorithms were not subjected to the laws of ethics. And what will happen when different countries come with the different versions of ethics for their AI? For example, in China, there's a social credit system where the citizens are being monitored for their behavior on surveillance systems. And there's a social credit that is created for them, which is going to be a very fundamental score when they apply for loans, when they apply to colleges. If you are in on a best behavior, you have more score. If there are any penalties or fines against you, or you have been caught having bad behavior, of course you have a lower social credit. And for a lot of other countries, this will be a huge breach of your personal space and privacy, but the system works in China. This is their definition of ethics, and culturally they are okay with it. And then in Sweden, the citizens, they are totally okay to let a biomicrochip implant into their skins that would allow them to carry out various functions, to open the locks, to pay use it instead of credit card. Once again, how many countries in the world, the citizens in the countries in the world, would be able to show this level of trust on their government to let them install a microchip into their skins? So once again, moving back to the history, we might be having this battle of God that was seen maybe as a myth, but maybe once we have these AI system coming from every country, and if we turn them into gods, whose version of ethics will be correct? Are we going back to that version of fights in the name of God, where every group would be convinced that what they think is right or wrong is the correct version of right and wrong? So where are we going? One direction that I know, and I have been involved in some of the research, is we call them smart cities. So these are the future visions of some of the cities around the world, and a lot of them are being visualized, like Singapore, Stockholm, Dubai, New York. And these are the large-scale cyber-physical complex socio-technical systems for an urban population that is comprised of many interconnected systems. And you can see that including all the cliches that I talked about before, in the end, there is a big data. These are data-dependent societies. We went into a lot of details about the data, but now we need to understand that data is going to be the new oil. So we go back in time and see that there were really brilliant big civilizations with we just have some of the paintings and some of the historical records of how grand they were. But now we only see that there are ruins that tell us maybe a really good story about how brilliant they were, or maybe a sad story of what has happened to them. And to me, I think of them as when they were building these empires, maybe they forgot about the people. Smart cities initiatives, they all stress on smart citizens. They want to involve people. They don't want to end up whatever happened in the history. So there's a good intention for involving citizens in the co-production and co-evolution of these smart cities, because we want to turn these citizens into technologically intelligent community where the collective human intelligence works in parallel with artificial intelligence. And it would be a neo humanist system that will serve for the betterment of humanity, or it's a functional system where the people will be there only to serve the system. The idea is that we have to involve people. So artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. But what about artificial stupidity? Just by giving digital devices in the hands of people and telling them how to use them, would that beat the natural or artificial stupidity? That's another question. So, smart cities for smart citizens, making them connected through digital devices. They are always there, they always follow the trends, no matter what. They want to be at top of the things in the cyberspace. But who are we forgetting here? There are people who may not be part of this digital cyberspace. And do we even care what will happen to our environment? How smart we would be to make these choices? Is everyone included in these smart city initiatives? That question is unanswered yet. So, lack of citizen engagement and representation of citizens from all walks of life can have serious repercussions. Lack of diverse representation can lead to biases in design that can disadvantage the represented or underprivileged groups of citizens, and the possibility of increasing the digital divide that will impact the less technology savvy population of the city. There is recently launched a documentary, The Social Dilemma, that shows that how this technology that connects us can, if not we are not cautious, that can control us as well. It's a really good watch for people who are really dependent on the social media for their social connections. But with COVID, we came to face a new reality. Now that being locked up, our dependence on these social media platforms to connect with our loved ones has increased way beyond what was already there. Working from home has brought us new ways of how to connect with the colleagues. How do we interact with the society? How do we shop? How do we do our education? I have been teaching this whole year online. So the dependence on technology is going to be there as long as we don't have the vaccine or we don't find a way out of this crisis. And another thing that came with this COVID was something that I personally got involved into a research was these COVID contact tracing apps. A lot of countries around the world immediately started launching their apps to try and see that if this could help, or at least that's what they said that this could help in finding out the cases and contact tracing and helping to suppress or slow down the infection rates. I got involved into and I looked at some of the individual cases of different countries. And what I was interested was that this was a real life test for a reality test for a lot of governments to find out that whether their citizens do trust them with their location history. There were a lot of debates around the privacy and the trust, and people didn't want to download the apps. They had a lot of resistance, especially in the democratic societies with individualism. So what was the problem was that at one end, this pandemic, our dependence on the technology increased, but at the same time, an avalanche of the fake news and the conspiracy theories that we saw at the same time, and the trust in the governments or the technology or the companies went down as well. In those circumstances, how can they trust these apps? And how would we see that why these apps should be a success? Another thing that I observed in the cases of all these different apps was COVID-19 is a social problem of interconnected humanity. And we are offering a technological solution here that is collecting data. And that data is going to be used at the back end by the algorithms to make some decisions. Now, bad choices of only one person could potentially be enough to impede the collective efforts of the whole society at large in their fight against the virus. And all of us in the lockdown in Melbourne know better than others that how much we get angry when people, one or two, just are not following the rules. But when it comes to the technological solutions, we have to understand, do these apps or any other technological solution have the potential to understand that in this particular case of pandemic, everyone matters? If no, then they are not going to be effective in this fight. They are not the silver bullets, because pandemic is a very special circumstance and everyone matters. And success of these contact tracing apps depend on everyone being involved, everyone downloading, or at least the majority of the population downloading. So looking at the demographics, the social status, the economical status, or cultural differences that we have in Australia, do we have the means in a technological world to be as diverse and inclusive as the reality out there in the world is? That would be a real question. To summarize, AI is a tool and it should be used as a tool. It's an amazing tool. It's a genius of the human mind, but it's not God. It's a tool. And we should not let it become a weapon of mass hatred and division among us. We should use it intelligently. I'm not against the use of social media platforms or use of AI, but I am against letting it become holier than thou God of our society. That's not what it is. Unless we fully, consciously, and unconsciously accept the value of diversity and inclusion for human existence, we will keep on repeating the history. The sophisticated tools will come and go. They will always be the tools. But in the end, what will matter for all of us is that we are all just people, and people are what matters. Thank you so much, and I would like to take any questions if there are.